I need a wife and you need strong sons, the Alpha King declared to the rejected Omega. The night was heavy with mist and shadow as Elara walked through the forest. The trees whispered above her, their leaves rustling like distant voices. She pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders, though it did little to keep out the chill that seemed to seep into her bones. Being an Omega in her pack had always meant she was weak, unworthy, and unwanted. Every glance from the pack elders reminded her that she did not belong. Elara's mother had died when she was very young, leaving her with only a few words of comfort that now echoed in her mind. You are stronger than they say, but the world may never see it.
She had clung to these words through years of rejection, yet each day the loneliness gnawed at her.
Tonight, the annual mate ceremony was taking place. Elara had avoided it as always, hiding in the shadowed paths of the forest instead of joining the other Omegas in the gathering halls. She had heard the laughter, the whispers, the scorn that followed her name like a shadow she could not escape. Her heart ached with longing and fear, a mixture she had learned to keep secret. The distant horns of the Alpha King's summons sounded over the hills. Every year, the strongest and most eligible alphas would gather to choose their mates. This year, however, the pack had done something different. They had listed her name among the potential mates, not out of respect, but as a joke, a cruel test to see her humiliation. Elara's stomach tightened as she approached the main hall. Torches lined the stone path, flickering in the wind. From within, she could hear the deep, commanding voice of the Alpha King himself, Kaelin. His presence was like a storm contained in a man, powerful, intimidating, and yet somehow sorrowful. Rumor said that no one had ever truly reached him, that his heart had been hardened by loss and betrayal. As Elara stepped into the hall, a hush fell over the crowd. Eyes, sharp and judgmental, studied her every movement. She tried to shrink to become invisible, but her feet carried her forward, as if drawn by an invisible force. Kaelin sat upon the high throne, a crown of black steel on his head, his eyes, sharp and dark as the midnight sky. When he spoke, his voice carried across the hall like thunder. Bring forward the Omega named Elara. The murmurs of the crowd turned to laughter and whispers of disbelief. Why her? They said. She is weak. She is nothing. Yet Kaelin's gaze did not waver. It was piercing, almost unnerving, as if he could see not just her body, but the depths of her soul. A strange shiver ran down her spine.
Do you understand why you are here? Kaelin's voice was calm, almost gentle, but it carried an undeniable weight.
Elara's voice trembled, though she forced it steady. I do not understand. You have been rejected by your pack, he said, his eyes narrowing slightly.
They have called you weak. You have been denied, cast aside.
And yet you are here. Fate has its reasons.
The crowd gasped. Whispers ran like wildfire. How could the feared Alpha King claim the rejected Omega? Some believed it was a trick. Others feared the consequences. Kaelin rose from his throne. The room seemed to darken as his figure loomed taller than any man there. He walked toward Elara, each step deliberate and confident. The sound of his boots echoed in the silence, like the heartbeat of a great storm approaching. I need a wife, he said, stopping before her.
And you need strong sons. The pack will have both.
Elara's heart pounded. The words were sharp and final, but inside her, confusion raged. Mine? Why me? Fear, anger, and a spark of something unfamiliar. Curiosity, perhaps, danced in her chest. She wanted to speak, to refuse, but no words came. The power in his gaze rooted her to the spot. Kaelin extended his hand. Every muscle in his body radiated control and dominance. Yet there was something more, a deep, hidden pain that tugged at the edges of her heart. For a moment the hall seemed to disappear. It was only her and him, standing in the shadow of destiny. Before she could take his hand, a chilling growl echoed from the doorway. Shadows shifted, and a large, spectral wolf emerged. Its eyes glowed like molten silver, and the hairs along its back bristled as it stepped closer to Alara. The crowd gasped and stumbled back, fear spreading through them like wildfire. Kalen did not flinch. He merely glanced at the wolf, his expression unreadable. The creature's growl lowered, almost like a warning, before it melted back into the shadows. Alara's heart raced. She did not understand what she had seen, but she knew it was connected to her, or to the Alpha King. Something ancient and powerful stirred around them. "You see it, don't you?" Kalen asked, his voice low. "The guardians of this kingdom do not welcome the weak. You must be ready for what comes next." She felt the weight of the night pressing down on her, the whispers of the past and the expectations of the future all crashing into her chest. Yet, beneath her fear, a strange feeling began to grow, a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could prove herself. The ceremony ended, and the crowd dispersed, leaving only Kalen and Alara in the hall. The Alpha King turned to her. "Come with me," he said. His tone was commanding, but not unkind. "There is much you must learn." Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, to avoid the world that had never accepted her. But something in Kalen's presence, a quiet strength, a promise of protection, and perhaps understanding, held her in place. Slowly she nodded and followed him. The journey to Kalen's fortress was long. They rode through forests where mist clung to the ground like silver smoke. Rivers shimmered under the moonlight, and distant mountains rose like dark sentinels against the sky. The path was dangerous, filled with unseen creatures and twisted roots. Yet Kalen guided them safely. Along the way, Kalen spoke little, but each word he did share was measured, carrying weight. "You will be tested," he said, "not by me alone, but by the world, by the shadows that linger, and by your own heart. Strength is not only in muscle or magic, it is in courage, in resilience, in the will to rise when all seems lost." Alara listened, absorbing every word. It was not just a lesson. It was a challenge. She realized that her life had been shaped by rejection, by the constant reminder that she was too small, too weak, too insignificant. But here, with Kalen, there was a possibility of change.
When they finally arrived at the fortress, the sheer scale of it took her breath away.
Black stone walls rose into the clouds, and torches blazed along the battlements. The gates were massive, etched with symbols of protection and power. The air hummed with an energy she could feel deep in her chest. Inside, the halls were silent, except for the echo of their footsteps. Kalen led her to a chamber filled with ancient tomes, armor, and strange artifacts. "This is your first lesson," he said. "To survive here, to become what you are meant to be, you must understand the past." Alara's eyes widened as she looked around. The room was like a library, a sanctuary, and a battlefield all at once. She saw the history of the kingdom, of its kings and queens, of battles won and lost. And in the corner, almost hidden, was a mirror, framed in silver. Kalen's gaze softened for a brief moment. "Look into it," he instructed. "Do not see yourself as others see you. See who you are, who you can become." Alara hesitated, then stepped forward. In the mirror, she saw not the timid, rejected Omega she had always been, but a reflection that shimmered with potential, courage, and something fierce and untamed. Her heart swelled. Perhaps she was not as weak as the pack had said. Perhaps she could be strong enough to stand beside the Alpha King, to face whatever shadows awaited them, to claim her place in this world. Before she could dwell on this thought, a distant roar echoed through the fortress. The spectral wolf she had seen earlier appeared again, this time circling the walls of the chamber. Its eyes were fixed on her, unblinking, unyielding. Kaelin stepped beside her, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "The road ahead will not be easy," he said, "but you are not alone. We will face it together." Elara looked at him, at the darkness that seemed to cling to the fortress, at the spectral guardian that watched her like a shadow of fate itself. Fear and excitement surged together in her chest. She knew, without a doubt, that her life had changed forever. Outside, the storm of destiny began to stir, and somewhere in the shadows, the whispers of the past promised trials, secrets, and challenges that would test the bond between an alpha and his omega. As the night deepened, Elara took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to face the unknown. And somewhere, in the echoing halls of the fortress, a voice murmured her name. The story of the rejected Omega and the Alpha King had only just begun. The fortress loomed over the cliffs like a dark sentinel, its black stones kissed by the pale light of the moon. Inside, the halls were silent, except for the echoes of footsteps and the occasional creak of ancient timber. Alara's heart raced as she followed Kaelin through winding corridors and vast chambers. Each step made her feel smaller, yet also strangely alive, as if the castle itself whispered that she had a place here. Kaelin did not speak much. His eyes, dark as storm clouds, constantly studied her, measuring her, challenging her. There was an unspoken expectation that she would rise to meet him, and the weight of it pressed down on her like the cold stone under her feet. Finally, they arrived in a grand hall lined with banners that bore the sigils of generations past. Torches flickered, casting shadows that danced across the high ceiling. Kaelin stopped in the center of the room, turning to face her. "This will be your home," he said, his voice low and commanding.
"And it will be your first test. To live here, to survive, you must understand strength."
Not just in body, but in mind and heart.
Elara swallowed, trying to steady her trembling hands.
I will try, she said softly.
Kaelin's gaze held hers. Try is not enough.
You will do, or you will fail.
Though his words were harsh, there was a strange honesty in them. He did not coddle, did not flatter. He demanded excellence. And perhaps, for the first time in her life, Elara felt challenged in a way that made her blood burn with determination. The days that followed were filled with lessons, training, and constant observation. Kaelin taught her to move like the wind, quiet and precise, to read the intentions of others, and to trust her instincts. Every moment tested her courage. Each time she faltered, he did not scold her. Instead, he waited, watching for her to rise on her own.
Elara began to see glimpses of the man behind the Alpha.
In the quiet hours when no one else was present, she noticed the weight in his shoulders, the fleeting shadows in his eyes. There was a sorrow he carried alone, a past that had shaped him into the powerful, sometimes ruthless ruler he was. Yet beneath that sorrow, she sensed a longing, perhaps for companionship, perhaps for understanding. One evening, after a long day of training, Kaelin led her to the highest tower of the fortress. The wind whipped around them, and the sea crashed against the cliffs below in roaring waves. He gestured toward the horizon.
"Do you see it?" he asked. "The world is vast and dangerous.
Those who are weak do not survive. But strength is not only about power. It is about courage, loyalty, and the willingness to face your fears." Elara wrapped her cloak tighter and nodded.
I want to face what comes without fear. Kaelin's eyes softened, if only for a moment.
Then you must learn to trust yourself. And to trust me. She looked at him, a mix of fear and curiosity in her heart. Yet, every day, his actions spoke of protection, of guidance, and of a silent belief in her potential. Their bond began to deepen, not through words, but through shared trials. One night, a shadowed figure crept into the fortress. Elara, sensing danger before the alarms sounded, alerted Kalen. Together, they cornered the intruder, a rogue supernatural creature seeking to test the Alpha's defenses. Kalen moved with precision, but it was Alara's quick thinking that saved them both. She lured the creature into a trap, using her knowledge of the fortress's layout and her growing courage. When the intruder fled, Kalen's dark eyes met hers. "You have learned well," he said, a rare smile ghosting across his lips. "You are stronger than you know." Praise from Kalen was rare, but it struck her deeper than she could explain. She had spent her life believing she was weak, and yet here, she had proven herself in the presence of the most powerful man she had ever known. Yet, not all was safe. The spectral wolf continued to appear, sometimes at the edges of her vision, sometimes closer, its silver eyes fixed upon her. Alara could not shake the feeling that it represented something, a warning, a challenge, or perhaps a test of her soul. One evening, while exploring a secret chamber of the fortress, she discovered an ancient mural depicting a king and queen standing together against shadowed enemies. Their bond radiated strength, and at their sides were two small children, their eyes glowing with promise. A shiver ran down her spine. Could this be a vision of what Kalen and she might become? A future where their bond could bring hope and power to the kingdom, where her rejection would be transformed into respect and purpose? Kalen entered the chamber quietly, watching her gaze linger on the mural.
"You see it, don't you?" he asked. "The bond between Alpha and Mate has always been the cornerstone of this kingdom."
Strength is not enough alone. Unity is what endures. Alara turned to him, her heart racing. Unity?
It sounds so simple, but I have always been alone.
Kylan stepped closer, placing a hand near hers, though not touching. You are not alone anymore, and you never will be, but you must be ready to face what comes. Darkness will test you. Shadows will rise, and the world will not forgive weakness. The words were heavy, but they sparked something inside her, a mixture of fear, determination, and an inexplicable longing. Over the following days, Alara's training intensified. Kalen introduced her to the ways of strategy, leadership, and survival. She learned to read the subtle movements of allies and enemies alike, to anticipate threats, and to act decisively. Each success built her confidence, yet each failure reminded her of the high stakes she now faced. As they trained together, moments of quiet intimacy began to emerge. A brush of hands during practice, a shared glance during a storm, the soft silence of mutual understanding. Each gesture was small but powerful, deepening their connection without words. One night, as a storm raged outside, Kalen invited her to the library. Candles flickered, casting warm light on the ancient tomes. He handed her a book, its pages filled with the history of the kingdom and the bloodline of the Alphas. "You must know your heritage," he said. "Understanding where you come from is the key to knowing who you can become. The past will teach you strength, and sometimes it will teach you mercy." Alara turned the pages, absorbing every story, every lesson of courage, sacrifice, and loyalty. She felt a growing sense of purpose. Perhaps she could rise above the rejection, prove her worth, and stand as Kalen's equal. Yet, danger was never far. In the shadows of the fortress, a rival noble conspired to weaken Kalen's rule. Whispers of betrayal and schemes of power reached Alara's ears. She realized that surviving the fortress would require more than courage and strength. It would require cunning, insight, and unwavering trust in the Alpha beside her. One evening, the spectral wolf appeared again, closer than before. Its eyes seemed to pierce her soul, as if it could see her fears, her doubts, and the fire within her heart. She took a deep breath, standing tall despite the fear that rose like a wave. Kalen appeared at her side. "Do you understand what it wants?" he asked softly.
Alara shook her head. I do not know.
"But I feel something. A warning, or perhaps a challenge." Kaelin nodded. It tests us. The guardians of this bloodline have always tested those who seek to stand beside the Alpha. You will face it again, and you must be ready. For the first time, Elara did not feel small. She felt a spark of courage, a seed of determination planted deep within her. She knew that she could survive, that she could grow, and that perhaps she could even protect Kaelin, the Alpha King who had claimed her fate with a single powerful declaration. As the storm raged outside, she looked at him and whispered, almost to herself, "I will not fail."
I know. In the darkness of the fortress, with the storm outside and the spectral wolf watching from the shadows, a bond began to form, not merely of duty, but of mutual respect, growing trust, and the faintest whisper of something deeper, something neither of them could yet name.
Yet even as they stood together, the winds of destiny stirred. The shadows that haunted the kingdom whispered secrets of trials to come, of curses that had not yet been broken, and of choices that could change the fate of both the rejected Omega and the Alpha King forever. Elara clenched her fists, determination blazing in her chest. The path ahead would be dark, and the trials would test them both. But she would not falter. She would rise. And when the shadows came, she would stand by Kaelin's side. The bond of shadows had begun, and the storm of fate was far from over. The days in the fortress had grown longer and heavier. Storm clouds often hung low over the cliffs, and the wind howled through the ancient towers like a restless spirit. Elara moved through the halls with more confidence than before, but her heart still trembled with the weight of what lay ahead. She had trained, learned, and grown stronger. Yet every corner of the fortress seemed to whisper reminders of danger. Kaelin watched her closely. As always, his dark eyes missed nothing. The way she hesitated before a decision, the subtle signs of fear, the small sparks of courage that shone through when she acted. He did not speak of his feelings, yet his actions told her that he noticed her struggles and triumphs equally. One morning, a messenger arrived with troubling news. A rival noble, a man named Lord Varen, had begun spreading unrest among the neighboring regions. He questioned Kaelin's rule, sowing seeds of doubt among allies and followers. Kaelin listened quietly as the messenger detailed the schemes, his expression unreadable. "Elara," Kaelin said after the messenger had gone, "the world outside these walls does not forgive weakness. You must learn not only to defend yourself, but to anticipate threats and act before they reach us." Elara nodded, determination flashing in her eyes. She was no longer the frightened Omega who had first entered the fortress. She would rise to meet every challenge. Their first test came sooner than expected. One night, as the moon shone pale over the cliffs, the fortress was attacked. Shadows moved silently along the walls, and strange creatures, twisted by dark magic, attempted to breach the gates. Alara's heart pounded, but she acted without hesitation. She ran to the battlements, her senses sharp from months of training. Kaelin appeared beside her, his presence steadying and commanding. Together, they faced the invaders. Elara used her knowledge of the fortress, luring the creatures into traps and leading them into corridors where Kaelin could strike with precision. The two moved as one, their bond unspoken, but evident in the way they anticipated each other's actions. When the attack was over, Elara leaned against the cold stone wall, her body trembling from exertion and adrenaline. Kaelin's hand brushed hers as he passed, a silent acknowledgement of her courage. "You are learning," he said, his voice low. "Not just strength, but judgment. That is what will keep you alive."
Elara's cheeks warmed, and she looked away.
She had always longed for recognition, for someone to see her worth. That simple touch, that quiet praise, meant more than she could explain. Yet, even as she celebrated her victory, shadows lingered. The spectral wolf appeared once more, watching her from the darkness beyond the walls. Its silver eyes gleamed, and Elara felt a shiver of unease. She could not tell whether it was a warning or a challenge. Kaelin noticed her glance.
It tests us,
he said quietly. Not to harm, but to prepare. You will face more of these trials.
Each one will teach you something important.
And each one will teach you about yourself.
Elara nodded, understanding that the fortress, the wolf, and Kalen's guidance were all part of a larger path. A path that would demand courage, loyalty, and resilience. As the days passed, their bond deepened. They shared small moments that carried weight, a quiet conversation by the fire, a shared glance during training, the soft comfort of presence during a storm. Each moment was a thread, weaving their hearts closer together, though neither spoke openly of it. One evening, Kalen led her to the castle gardens. Moonlight bathed the flowers in silver, and the scent of night-blooming jasmine filled the air. "Elara," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Do you understand why I chose you?" I think I understand," she said. "Because you need someone strong?" He shook his head. "Not only strong, you have courage, intelligence, and a heart that does not waver in fear. That is rare. That is why I chose you."
Elara's heart quickened. His words were sincere, though he spoke with quiet restraint.
She felt warmth bloom in her chest, a feeling she had never experienced before. Before she could respond, the wind shifted, and a whisper of shadow moved at the edge of the garden. The spectral wolf appeared again, larger and more imposing than ever. Its silver eyes locked onto her. Kalen's hand rested lightly on her shoulder.
It approaches, but remember, it does not attack without reason.
You must face it, not with fear, but with courage. Elara took a deep breath, recalling all she had learned.
She stepped forward, meeting the wolf's gaze. She did not run, did not falter. Instead, she focused on the determination that had grown inside her, the lessons Kalen had taught, and the bond that connected them. The wolf circled her slowly, its movements deliberate. Elara's hands shook slightly, but she held her ground. Kalen watched silently, his presence steady and reassuring. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the wolf vanished into the shadows. Elara felt a strange mix of relief and pride. She had faced the test, and though the meaning of the wolf's visit remained unclear, she had proven her courage. In the following weeks, Kalen and Elara faced many challenges. Political intrigue, rival nobles, and supernatural threats tested their strength and trust. Elara grew more confident, learning to anticipate danger and act decisively. Kalen, in turn, began to reveal glimpses of the man beneath the crown, the grief he carried, the moments of doubt, and the rare softness he reserved only for her. Their connection deepened, built not on words alone, but on shared experience, trust, and mutual respect. Every trial, every challenge drew them closer together, though both were careful to maintain boundaries, understanding the delicate balance of power and respect that defined their relationship.
One afternoon, Kalen called Elara to the library.
Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating rows of ancient tomes. He handed her a book bound in deep blue leather.
"This contains the history of the Alpha Line," he said. "Read it carefully."
Understanding the past will prepare you for the future.
Elara opened the book, her eyes scanning the pages. Stories of kings and queens, battles, sacrifices, and triumphs filled her mind.
She realized how much responsibility lay on Kalen's shoulders, and how rare it was for someone to understand the burden of leadership. As she read, she felt a new sense of purpose. She was not merely an Omega. She was a partner in this legacy, capable of contributing her strength, intelligence, and courage. Days later, Kalen invited her to the armory. He taught her not only how to fight, but how to move with strategy and precision. Every step, every decision mattered. Elara learned to anticipate attacks, read opponents, and act with confidence. Each lesson pushed her further strengthening her body and spirit. During a break, Kalen approached her quietly. "You have grown," he said, his voice almost gentle. "I can see it in your eyes. You are no longer the Omega who entered this fortress. You are someone who can stand beside me, shoulder to shoulder." Elara felt her cheeks warm. Praise from Kalen was rare, and yet it filled her with a sense of pride and belonging she had never known. She realized that her rejection by the pack had prepared her for this moment, forging resilience that now defined her. Yet, even as she thrived, danger lurked. Lord Varen's schemes intensified, and whispers of rebellion spread through the kingdom. Elara understood that the trials were not over, that each challenge would demand more courage, more wisdom, and more trust in Kalen.
One evening, Kalen led her to the tower once more.
The moon shone bright, reflecting off the ocean waves below. He turned to her, his expression serious. "The true test is not outside," he said. "It is within. You must face your fears, your doubts, and the shadows of your past. Only then can you be ready for the world and for the bond we share." Elara looked at him, determination burning in her heart. "I am ready," she said. Kalen's gaze softened, and for the first time, a faint smile appeared. "Then we begin." The storm outside raged, the wind carrying whispers of trials yet to come. But for the first time, Elara felt a sense of purpose and belonging. She was no longer the rejected Omega. She was someone who could stand beside the Alpha King, ready to face whatever darkness awaited them. And in the shadows, the spectral wolf watched, its silver eyes gleaming as if acknowledging that the Omega had begun to rise. The trials of the heart had begun, and neither Elara nor Kalen would ever be the same again. The winds howled violently over the cliffs that cradled the fortress, carrying with them a sense of foreboding. Dark clouds twisted across the sky, casting shadows over the black stone walls. Within the fortress, Elara moved with quiet purpose, her heart steady despite the storm outside. This night was unlike any other. The trials she had faced, the lessons she had learned, and the courage she had discovered within herself were all leading to this moment. Kalen watched her closely as she entered the main hall. The room was vast and empty, except for them. Candles flickered, casting tall shadows that danced across the walls. Kalen's eyes, usually sharp and unreadable, held a rare intensity. It was not anger, nor was it merely command. It was a storm of emotion he had kept hidden for years, care, concern, and a quiet longing. "Elara," he said, his voice low but firm. "Tonight, the final trial begins. The shadows that have followed us, the curses that linger over this kingdom, will confront us directly. You must trust yourself, and you must trust me." Elara met his gaze without fear. She had trained, fought, and survived challenges that once would have terrified her. Now, standing in the flickering light, she felt the strength Kalen had helped her find within herself. "I trust you," she said, "and I trust myself." A sudden gust of wind swept through the hall, extinguishing some of the candles. Shadows twisted and stretched along the walls until they seemed to take on shapes of their own. From the darkness emerged the spectral wolf, larger and more imposing than ever. But this time it was not alone. A second, darker form appeared beside it, an apparition of a king from the past, cloaked in shadow. The cursed ancestor Kalen had once spoken of. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light, fixed on Elara and Kalen. Kalen stepped forward, placing himself between Elara and the apparition. "It tests us because of our bond," he said. "The curse will not break unless we face it together. If you falter, it may consume you both." Elara drew a deep breath. Fear whispered in the back of her mind, but she silenced it. She was no longer the timid Omega rejected by her pack. She was strong, she was prepared, and she would stand beside the Alpha King. The apparition spoke, its voice like the wind over jagged cliffs. The bond between Alpha and Omega must be proven. Only then will the shadows retreat. But one must be sacrificed for the sake of legacy. Kylan's jaw tightened. His eyes never left Alara's. No one will be sacrificed, he said firmly. Not her. Not us. We face this together. Alara felt the surge of power in his words. They moved forward together side by side as the spectral wolf growled and the shadowed ancestor circled them. Kalan raised his hand, channeling a force that shimmered faintly in the air, while Alara focused on her own inner strength, calling upon the courage and resilience she had nurtured over the past weeks. The room seemed to pulse with energy as they confronted the shadows. The spectral wolf lunged, not to harm, but to test their reflexes and unity. Alara dodged, her movements precise and deliberate, remembering every lesson Kalan had taught her. Kalan intercepted a strike, his strength and skill unmatched, but his eyes were always on her, guiding her, protecting her, silently trusting her. The cursed ancestor raised its hand, and darkness surged toward them like a tidal wave. Alara felt the fear rise, but she did not retreat. Instead, she reached out with her mind and heart, focusing on the bond she shared with Kalan. She felt his courage, his determination, and the trust he placed in her. Together they formed a shield of will, of unity, and of shared strength. The shadows clashed against their bond, twisting and striking like lightning in a storm. Alara's arm shook, her legs burned, but she held fast. Kalan's voice rose above the chaos. Alara, believe in yourself. Believe in us. And she did. A brilliant light surged from within them, bright and unwavering, casting away the shadows and forcing the spectral wolf and the cursed ancestor to retreat. The darkness shrieked and dissolved, leaving only the faintest traces that soon faded entirely. The storm outside began to calm, the winds softening, the clouds parting to reveal a pale silver moon. Alara fell to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. Kalan moved to her side, lifting her gently. His hands, so often commanding, were now tender, protective. You did it, he said, his voice almost breaking with relief. You faced the shadows, and you did not falter.
Alara looked at him, a mixture of pride, exhaustion, and something deeper filling her chest.
We did it, she corrected. Together. Kalan's dark eyes softened. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You are no longer the Omega who was rejected, he said. You are my equal, strong, brave, and irreplaceable. A warmth spread through Alara's chest. The words she had longed to hear, the acknowledgement of her worth, the acceptance she had craved, all came from the man she had feared and admired in equal measure. She realized that her journey was not just about survival, but about transformation, becoming someone worthy of standing beside the Alpha King, someone capable of shaping her own destiny.
They returned to the highest tower of the fortress.
The sea below was calm, reflecting the moonlight like liquid silver. They stood side by side looking out over the kingdom they had both fought to protect, bonded not only by fate, but by choice, courage, and love. Kalan's hand brushed against hers again, this time intentionally, and she did not pull away. Our bond has been tested, he said softly, and we have proven that together we are stronger than any curse, any shadow, any danger. Alara nodded, her heart full. I never thought I could be this strong, but with you, I feel I can face anything. Kalan looked at her, his gaze lingering with something more than respect or admiration. Something warm, tender, and yet fierce. You are not just strong, he said quietly. You are everything I need, and more than I ever imagined. A gentle silence fell over them, broken only by the soft sound of the waves crashing against the cliffs below. For the first time, neither felt the weight of expectation, fear, or loneliness. They stood together as partners, as equals, as two souls bound by fate and choice. In the days that followed, the fortress became a place of quiet strength and unity. Ilara continued to grow, learning not only how to defend herself and the kingdom, but how to navigate the delicate balance of leadership, trust, and power. Kaelin began to share more of his past with her, moments of loss, of betrayal, of lessons learned too late, and she listened, offering comfort and understanding. Their relationship blossomed naturally, without words of declaration, without the need for force. Every glance, every touch, every shared victory strengthened their bond. They had faced darkness together, and it had forged a connection neither could deny. One morning, as the first light of dawn crept over the cliffs, Kaelin and Ilara walked through the gardens of the fortress. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of blooming flowers and the sea below. "Ilara," Kaelin said, his voice soft and steady. "The trials have ended, but the future is still ours to shape. You are not merely my Omega, you are my partner, my equal, and my strength." Ilara smiled, a warmth blooming in her chest. "And you are my Alpha, my guide, and the one who believed in me when no one else did." Kaelin reached out, taking her hand in his. The connection was simple, yet profound. It was not about power, or dominance, or obligation. It was about trust, respect, and the love that had grown quietly through trials and shadows. From the cliffs, the kingdom stretched out below them, vast and full of possibilities. The shadows that had haunted them were gone. The curse broken not by sacrifice, but by unity, courage, and the bond of two hearts who refused to falter. As they stood together, watching the sunrise, Kaelin whispered, almost to himself, "Together, nothing can break us." Ilara squeezed his hand, feeling the truth in his words. She had been rejected, abandoned, and underestimated. But now, she was seen, she was valued, and she was loved. She had risen from the shadows to stand beside the Alpha King, not as a follower, but as an equal, a partner, and a force to be reckoned with. The fortress was no longer a place of fear, but of strength. The kingdom, once shadowed by curses and doubt, would now know the power of unity and courage. And at the heart of it all stood two souls, bound not by destiny alone, but by choice, love, and unbreakable trust. As the sun's first rays touched the black stones of the fortress, Ilara and Kaelin turned toward the future, ready to face whatever came next. Together, they were more than Alpha and Omega. They were a force of light and shadow, courage and love, destined to shape the fate of their kingdom for generations to come. And somewhere in the quiet corners of the fortress, the faint echo of the spectral wolf's silver eyes shimmered one last time, as if approving the bond that had endured, the hearts that had grown, and the love that had finally found its home. The story of the rejected Omega and the Alpha King had reached its beginning of forever, where darkness no longer held power, and love became the strongest force of all.